Lion face. Lemon face. Ooh.
Leaders don't force people to follow. They invite them on a journey.
Ideas have consequences. No one knows this better than the luminary who believes that everything begins with and revolves around ideas.
Different doesn't mean inferior.
Know thyself.
Welcome to the Epoch Podcast, your weekly dose of mental foreplay. I'm Matt.
I'm Jen.
I'm Austin.
I'm Christina.
And I'm David.
And this week we're talking about lemon leadership, and it's a book written by Brett Johnson in response to the idea that leaders were being categorized as either entrepreneurs or managers, and when in reality there's several different types of leaders. Lemon being an acronym, or I guess Brett refers to it as an acrostic for the different types of leaders. So there's luminaries, entrepreneurs, managers, organizers, and networkers. This whole thing was brought to us by Miss Tina, I'd say a year ago. I don't know. Tell us, what's up?
I want to give a shout out to my brother Jeffrey because he's the one who turned me on to it. And he's a really good business-minded person. He's pretty cool. He's really great with people. And they were doing it in his organization. And so he was sharing it, proselytizing it almost, you could say. Not really. Anyway, so he got me into it and I read it and thought, you know what, this is helpful for organizations. And we were kind of trying to be an organization, so it made sense to share it, I thought.
Definitely.
Right on. And then so we all bought the book. Austin bought the old, outdated book, but you know, he's trying to keep up with us.
Apparently, we just figured this out.
So the book's been around for a while. It's been around since 2005. We just found it, again, a year ago or so. And I know it's been a really cool thing for us. David's idea of know thyself, knowing not just who we are, but knowing who we're working with and their tendencies as outlined in Lemon Leadership, I think has been pretty helpful. I know, Austin, that was something that you expressed early on about what leadership styles and the people in the group.
Yeah, it probably behooves us to, for context, we were all doing Epic on a little bit different level back in 2017, and it has morphed into what this podcast is and what the site currently looks like. But at the time, the team was probably, twice as big as it is now, if not even larger. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to do quite a bit. And one of the things that we value, I've always valued as a leader, as really just as I grew up in a house, my mom was, when she went through the divorce with my dad, she went to counseling and began to be a trainer, or she started training to be a counselor. And she started getting into Personality Plus, if you're familiar with that. And then another really good kind of, I don't even know what these are called. Does anyone know what this type of testing is called? Personality testing?
Yeah. This I would consider Lemon Leadership like leadership testing, just like Personality Plus would be personality.
Yeah, profiling.
Right. Yeah, whatever it is, it's basically, know thyself. So Personality Plus was something I grew up with. I literally in third grade was telling people I'm phlegmatic melancholy, and just like, I'm like, what? And so it's always been something that I've had value in dealing with other people, because surprise, not everyone is like you. And sometimes people value different things in their personalities, and you can take it personally because, I would never have said that, but doesn't mean that they're trying to be a jerk, or I would never have done it that way. It doesn't mean that they're stupid. There's all sorts of differences. And so Personality Plus, another one that we were really big into was DISC personality profiles, which is kind of a professional personality profile. And then we had Lemon Leadership, and obviously there's a lot of people who know Myers-Briggs. And I'm sure I'm leaving out, you got the
golden person.
You got the
strengths.
Yeah. Strengths Finders is another one.
I feel like the popular one right now is, I'm not even sure how it's pronounced, Enneagram or something.
Enneagram is one. Then you got the the Archetypes by Carl Jung, the 12 Archetypes, which is a whole different, that was largely been brought over into the branding world. What's the one with the emotional intelligence, the emotional IQ or EQ? IQ tests are even kind of in this. So there's just a whole discussion around these types of testing and ways of viewing humanity that I have always found fascinating. And, so that's where when Christine was like, hey, have you ever heard of Lemon Leadership? I was like, no, but I'm going to check it out because I love this stuff. I love understanding my friends and family and realizing all the ways in which they're wrong.
Yeah, right? Understanding why they're so dumb.
That's why you're so stupid. Got it.
I think it also gives people common vocabulary to talk about. So if there's something like, well, I always do this one way and I can't really put it in a nice package. You're like, well, that's because you are an M. You're a manager and you manage people or whatever. So I think it's helpful in that context too.
Totally.
I think
to speak of just like that's because you're an M. There's a story in the book. I remember he's doing this meeting with a company about lemon leadership, and he goes through it. And L stands for luminary, but you could call him a visionary. And somebody in a meeting says, "Shouldn't it be venom leadership?"
That's good.
And then he goes, "Let me guess, you're a manager." Because the managers have to be these are the systems and this is the way it's supposed to be type of thing. So, but anyways, you're going to say, Matt?
Oh, wasn't it? I thought it was a melon because managers should be first. Yes.
Oh, maybe it was that. Maybe whatever it was. The point is,
venom.
you could guess that the guy was a manager because of it,
right? Yeah. And I was going to say, I know Jennifer in the past has kind of pushed back a little bit on these things in the sense that you think maybe it kind of just has us put other people in boxes.
I mean, sometimes, and I think that's just the way my organizational brain works. But sometimes people can get stuck like, well, the majority of my personality traits or my strengths tends to fall in this category. So even though maybe I relate to 7 out of 10 of the traits, I'm going to adapt and become those other that weren't mine because that's what I need to do because this is what my trait is. Whereas essentially when you do this test, you go, okay, well, how can I implement other areas of different types into my style, and especially with leadership, because really we should be adapting and making our leadership style kind of blend with other people's leadership styles to propel things forward. If I just get stuck in my ways and say, nope, this is who I am and this is how I'm going to be, then I'm never going to grow. But part of that knowing that piece is developing it, moving it forward.
I think it's definitely like interesting, like this, the differences in philosophies. I know growing up, I was told like, hey, you need to be well-rounded. You need to be able to, acknowledge, work on those strengths, but really to, bring up those weaknesses. And then there was a push by, several successful people saying, hey, don't worry about your weaknesses. Find the people that are strong where you're weak, and then just double down on your strengths. Like I know currently, like Gary Vaynerchuk's like huge on that. Like, forget about your weaknesses, focus on your strengths only. And so there's definitely.
Well, and I think that's a difference of value too. Sorry, did I get you wrong?
No.
Like if I value that I want to be the best in something, or I want to excel in a certain thing, then yes, I'm going to strengthen my strengths. But if I value collaboration and cooperation, then I'm going to try to broaden my toolbox in a sense, so I can identify with as many people in the room as possible.
That's the thing. I'm laughing as you guys are talking because you're right. There are certain personalities that literally say, focus on your strengths, don't worry about your weaknesses. Then there's other personalities that go, wait, I have weaknesses, I need to fix this. Right? And they're both proving their point in the midst of it, which is obviously fun.
Do you remember what from that program that we did, the Carolyn Leaf program?
Yeah, she talks about that.
She talks about the fact that I can't remember. Are they pillars? 7 pillars or something like that, or remember. Thought or something? She categorized
it's ways of thinking,
ways of thinking,
or ways of
parts
learning.
of your brain that you that you think from, in a sense. And what she was saying was that instead of trying to bring everything up at the same time, in other words, if I'm good at this, if I'm just say, for example, I'm good at math, but I'm not good at language arts or whatever. And what she was saying was that your brain grows a lot better if you focus on learning math as good as you can, as best as you can. And it's all right if you're weaker in your language area, because she says that it's actually worse for your development if you try to bring your weaker levels, your weaker areas up to the same level of your stronger areas, in a sense. It's kind of,
I'm curious how much of that has to do with like confidence in yourself and seeing yourself as somebody who can learn, as somebody who is, adept like that, versus focusing on your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yeah. I mean, I've noticed that that you can get a mental block if you are trying something that you're not good at and you're not succeeding, especially as a child. And you can get a mental block and then just say, oh, I'm just not good at that, and literally it be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You end up not being good at it, and you say, oh, well, that's just because I'm not good at this, Well,
that kind of goes with what Jen was saying about putting yourself in boxes, essentially.
Yeah, totally.
But I think go ahead.
I was going to say, your sense of identity defends itself too. Mm-hmm. So that your reticulate activating system, it looks for proof that, well, I'm not good at spelling, so every word that I spell wrong is my identity, and the dozens, if not hundreds of words that I spelled right, don't notice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you notice that you can't spell collaborate, but you just wrote a whole paragraph just fine, except that one word, and that's the one word you see because that's your identity.
Right.
I think it's
spell check.
I think it's super awesome that you bring up identity, because I know we focus on identity a lot at the Epic. And that's one of the things that Brett actually brings up. One of his highlighted quotes in the book is lead from identity. And so I'm curious where you guys fell, if you feel like sharing how you scored out on this thing, if you remember how you scored out. Maybe you haven't done it in a while. Jennifer and I recently redid it.
Yeah, and I think that's what we were talking before we started the show.
She was hiding it from you guys.
Well, when we did it about a year ago, I was pretty my first one was entrepreneur, and then second was organization. And there were probably 2-point difference. And then the other ones were kind of really far below. And then just being knowledgeable of different leadership styles. And these, I think for me, my organizational brain is like, yes, I have 5 points to work on and I can focus on these things. And just through the process of maybe a little over a year, retaking it, my Lumineer is the highest, followed by entrepreneurship, which is 1 point below. And then the other 3 are very within 2 to 3 points of the others. And so I thought that was just really interesting, because just being knowledgeable of it, I was able to kind of adapt and build my toolbox, which is what I like to do.
I wondered too, thinking in a different way when you're taking it, like as far as thinking about different kind of scenarios or environments or whatever, because David and I were having this conversation last night. I was actually going to take it again and I forgot to. But David, I feel like in relating to life, David and I function very differently, but somehow we both came up with the same top leadership style.
David,
and
so
we were we were having a somewhat lengthy conversation about the ins and outs of that and how that plays out. Because he was taking it thinking about business specifically, or the scenarios that he is very competent in. And I think I was taking it more in relation to life in general. And so I don't know what the best way to do it is, but
I don't know. Austin, I know that, like you said, like the disc is professionally oriented. Did you notice? I can't recall. Is Lemon Leadership geared a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, it's more geared towards kind of that. I mean, things in which you are a leader. So, if you're not in leadership at work and you're an employee that largely just does what you're told, and you are thinking about how you act at work, then you will find your results to be vastly different from DISC or this test. There's other tests that are designed to kind of, ignore some of that, subjectivity. But the good ones, I think, absolutely say, like, if you take certain DISC tests, they will tell you, think about how you are at work, right? And so I took the DISC test years ago and came back with different results, and then I took it again in 2017 when we started Epoch, and my results were quite different. And it was actually realizing, because with Epoch, I was quote unquote in charge, so I was able to be more normal me. I didn't have to. And when I realized, oh my gosh, that is who I really am if I'm the one in charge. And so I think if you're in charge, you'll see a little bit more of who you really are, versus if you're having to kind of acquiesce to other people's desires more and everything like that. So if you're taking any sort of leadership test, understand that leadership is a multi-layered, discussion. And in some ways, we're all leaders, and in some ways, there's only certain people that are truly leaders at work. And it just depends on where you're at, is what I've found anyway.
I like those days when Austin was in charge. Those are good. And I think John Maxwell's 360-degree leadership was a book, or actually it was like a book on CD, I think I listened to for like a decade ago. But I thought it was cool. Just you bring up, places where you're leadership. His thing was, you're a leader everywhere. Like, you don't have to be a leader like by title. You can lead the person above you through your actions, not because that you're telling them what to do, but because you can influence them from wherever you're at. So whether it's your peers that you're working side by side with, people that are directly underneath your control, or the people that are telling you what to do, you can still lead in a variety of ways. I know for me, like, I say I like it when Austin's in control, because I don't like having to be that guy that's making those decisions. I scored. Quick little sidebar. The thing I didn't like about Personality Plus, it was for a personal thing, is that I almost scored even across the board, and so I didn't have I couldn't own a category. And then with this one, I loved it because it's clear cut. It was entrepreneur and luminary. There were no questions about it. So that's what I like. Interesting. That's a personal thing, though. I don't think that had anything to do with itself.
What was the difference between them? Like
the spread.
The spread.
So it was 19 and 20, or 20 and 19 for entrepreneur and luminary, and then pretty much 5s for manager and organizer and networker.
Do we want to do a brief overview of what the 5 are?
Yeah.
Should.
I actually have
Do you have it?
I have some things. I don't know if it's what you're looking for, but luminaries are people who see the world through the lens of ideas, viewpoints, intellectual constructs, the why. Entrepreneurs are people who see the world through the lens of opportunity, immediate needs to be filled, the when. Managers are people who see the world through systems, the practical workings, the how. Organizers are people who see the world through the lens of tasks to be done, people to be served, the what. And networkers are people who see the world through the lens of webs to weave, people to connect, elements together, the who. That's one of the...
That's good.
I think it's a good quick summary.
I think it's perfect.
That was useful.
Yeah, where'd you get that?
I don't remember, but it was something I was putting together for my post. I have a couple other things like
my blog.
Already getting in my blog, so you can't have it. The other things that they compared to were like the body and a car. If you're interested in hearing those,
please.
The luminary equals the brain. That makes it sound like they're the smart ones, but really it's just like what things are flowing from. The entrepreneur would equal the heart and muscle. The manager would be the skeleton. The networker would be the nervous system transmitting communications. And the organizer would be the blood going back and forth through the body, cleaning up the junk, attacking intruders, spotting where things are dead, and bringing fresh life and energy where needed. Something I don't love about the way that he writes these books are that it feels really imbalanced in various areas. Like, it doesn't feel like it's a good follow through of a well-rounded picture of all of the different parts some of the time.
I remember Austin critiquing that about a year ago and saying, like, you can tell he's luminary because that's where his passion's at. In this
like the luminary chapters are like super long, and then you get the other ones, you're like, okay. And then there's like some parts that are actually, there was a couple.
He literally doesn't even put anything. That one, I'm like, what is this?
It's funny because I was listening to him talk, and he was listing all the ways that the variety of leaders like to be appreciated, and he specifically went in this order. He's like, luminaries want to be loved for their ideas, and entrepreneurs like, hey, don't applaud me, pay me if you really like it. All right, throw the cash at me. Managers want to be respected, want to be honored. He skipped organizers. Didn't even say anything, and then said,
which is funny because he says he makes the comment several times that it's the one that gets overlooked, which is kind of like, okay.
Yeah. And then he said, networkers just want to be liked. Don't necessarily have to be paid. Just like me. So
yeah, just hang out.
What was the other one where he skipped organizers? And I was like,
there was a couple times. It was funny.
Like the one where darn it, where's it's the intellectuals, the one where he puts them in the capitals. Luminary has the intellectual capital. Entrepreneur has the financial capital. Managers have the human capital. And then he totally skips organizers. They have no capital at all, apparently.
Sweat equity, that's it.
Yeah. Then the networkers have the relational capital.
To me, I feel like the way that he wrote his books was in an organizer sort of way of like only 70% done.
Explain that, Christina.
Okay, so organizers are very much, let's just get the stuff done. They have intuition about how to just move forward, period. And so they can do that. They can see a situation, and they don't want all the meetings and all the trying to figure things out, the step by step. They just want to get going. And they can do that really well, but then they're like, okay, we got to where we needed to be, and they don't actually finish. Like, he shared an example of moving offices, and he had 2 organizers in charge of it, and they got there in 2 days. Like, it was super well orchestrated, but they didn't like bolt down the cubicle divider things, and so things were not exactly finished, and he kept thinking, okay, when is this going to get finished? But it never did, because it was working. It was functioning. They had the printers. They had the computers. Who cares?
Yeah, in their book, it was finished. And so done.
Yeah. Yeah, he came back from a business trip and was like, there was wasn't there like an office like with all the pictures and stuff that still hadn't been hung, and
probably
the cubicles hadn't been bolted together, and certain things, but the organizers, like, he waited for a couple weeks and realized nobody was gonna finish this.
Yep.
It was about that time that I realized I should have put a manager in charge.
Exactly.
Right. So then there's managers, which I think they're, if you are one, I love you. But I have made a living, literally I make a living by challenging the status quo. Mm-hmm. And managers love systems and love proven, like, this is the way we do it. This is why we do it this way. It has worked for 1,000 years. Why would you change it? And I'm one of those. I am a luminary like 90%. And then I'm like 10% organizer. Because eventually I do just get to work, and I am kind of a, if it's working, it's great. Let's move on to the next idea. Mm-hmm. But I would, so I'm a luminary organizer, and as someone who's always kind of new idea, squirrel, and then, well, just get something done and then move on. Those who are around me who are managers, like, I'm so sorry. Because I don't do anything the same way twice. All of my ideas are always morphing and shifting. And if anything has ever been said to me, 1,000,000 times in a business meeting, it's, but you said. So
sorry, Austin.
Sorry, managers.
I just love that, like, you and I work together on a project, and we've nailed down the opportunity. We've nailed down the ideas months ago.
It could change the world. So good. It's such a good idea.
And I thought it was funny when I was going through and I was looking at the networking piece, because like I said earlier, I scored a 5, which was like a quarter of what I scored on the 2 higher categories. And I think back to the jobs I've had, and again, they weren't leadership roles necessarily. At least the first one wasn't. Like my first job out of high school, I was a bellman, and so I was essentially schmoozing people for about 10 minutes at a time. I'd act as a concierge for them, and I'd just show them the place, and I was fantastic at that role at that age. And then I went in the military and eventually moved into public affairs. I was the community relations chief, and again, just a whole lot of schmoozing, but literally my lowest category. So I found that to be pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. But I think you have to look at it as through the lens of leadership. So you are outgoing and like to talk, and that's your personality. You're very extroverted.
I'm phlegmatic sanguine.
In that sense. And so I think when you think about your like work habits, and when you're working and you're working with people, and you have to get a project done, what does that look like?
Doesn't.
Well, doesn't you said you were high on entrepreneur. The entrepreneur basically is jack of all trades in a sense. Like sure. They'll do whatever needs to be done to get the job moving or accomplished.
And I find myself in the fireman role a lot, like volunteering. All right, whatever you people will specialize in these things. Cool. What's left over? What needs to be done? And I'm happy to fill those roles often, but. And I think organizers kind of fill in that role too. So maybe that was the part of me that's an organizer. Yeah, it's certainly not this desk.
But
yeah, it's a kind of a it's kind of a weird way of describing it, because quote unquote organizers are not organized necessarily in this way of categorizing.
Yeah, I think one thing that's worth mentioning is that I've personally found it, I'm just trying to look it up here, the difference between organizers and entrepreneurs, for me from the outside, it's pretty subtle, because they're both kind of, well, what needs to get done, I'm going to do that, but it's the motivation underneath it, it's
the purpose. That's true. You're
right. So entrepreneurs are motivated by the getting something to the finish line and getting something quote unquote accomplished. And then organizers, from the best I can tell, are motivated by just getting something off of the problem list, right? And so organizers have this kind of list in their head of problems, and once it's off the list, even if it's not finished, that's fine. The list is clear, and so it's hence the half unbolted cubicles and the pictures that haven't been hung, versus an entrepreneur being in charge of that. May not have done it as quickly, but would have, that's where you probably get an entrepreneur in and you say, hey, we need to get this done. And they'll take that last 30% and get it done, because it's, what they do. I don't know. Anybody else have any kind of confusion on those two?
The entrepreneur, the biggest thing with them is the opportunity. So they're like, oh, there's that need over there, and we can make some money off of that. So let's go from A to B to where we can make some money off of it. The organizer is more like, oh, this is a mess. What do we need to do to get from point A to point B? And the funny thing with the organizers is like they're not like we were saying earlier. They don't have the structure. It's very intuitive. They're like, okay, well, you just know that we need to do this and this and this. They know how to triage. Or they
how to prioritize.
But it's more of an intuitive thing rather than a system thing.
Which is why they're often overlooked. They mention that's why they're often overlooked, is because they can't really explain why they're thinking we should go this way or what we should do next. They're not necessarily good at understanding that about themselves. It's just an intuitive thing.
The funny thing, I was super high organizer. I was like as high as you can get organizer. And I was my organizer was like 21, or what was the highest?
That's what you
I
said.
don't know. Yeah, organizer was 21, but then my manager was 14, and my entrepreneur was 10.
I will see. Hearing the guy that's in charge of the website saying he's a 70% kind of guy is like, oh no.
Yeah. Well, that was funny because it was like, for us, it was more like, okay, when I was working on website stuff, it's like, okay, it's working. And she'd be like, well, that,
is it?
Picture needs to go
Is it?
4 pixels. I'm like, for goodness sake. Okay, you need to make sure that aligns with that. I'm like,
Don't go look at our header then.
no.
So we haven't talked much about Networker, which we all just recently had a very dear Networker friend of ours pass away. Christopher Teasdale, God rest his soul. He was part of the original Epoch back in 2017. He and I had an office together, and we're cranking out as much as we could. A lot of the Epoch library is from those times. Anyways, but yeah, Chris was a networker to the bone, and I love some of the oh man, where's it? I need to find it.
That was literally the way that they brought the book into the conversation.
It was.
Read this because it explains Chris so well.
Yeah, because networkers can be a bit like, so do you do anything?
What would you say you do here?
I'm a people person. Can't you see that? The thing though was like the dude just like he did. What am I trying to say here? Like you have to admire his desire to do something and help. Like, yeah. I mean, man, it was like square peg round hole, but it was gonna happen, and I really admired that of him. Like, he's like, I know this is totally not my cup of tea, but I'm gonna try to do it as best as I can.
Yeah, and
especially with like website stuff and all that, it was just like, man.
Anyway, go ahead.
I was just looking at page 30 at least on my version of the book. It says, it talks about the different, what luminaries, entrepreneurs, managers, organizers, networkers, like how they would describe a good use of time. Mm-hmm. And, he says, let's see, asked the managing director of a successful British company what he does every day when he closes his office door from 1 to 2 p.m., and it says, I talk to my creator about how he runs the universe. It says, caution, luminary at work. And then entrepreneur, that's all very well, but while you're in there, I'm out pounding the pavement, doing deals and closing on opportunities. And the manager, I believe that your creator set some procedures and laws in place some time ago that would work the same every day so that we can get done with our jobs until we get the notice that the sun will rise in the west and gravity's been reversed. What is there to talk about? Organizer, you have no idea about the number of jobs I take care of for you and the fires I put out. Practical things while you're in there thinking. Yeah. Get a dose of reality. There are jobs to do. And the network. I know someone, my cousin's friend, who knows this creator guy. Maybe we could do I'll do lunch sometime. Anyway, there's this tremendous opportunity I came across when I was talking to Bob, and it's a done deal, really. All we have to do is meet and ...
Totally. And I think that is a good example of how each way of leading or each way of working, it's really easy to discredit what everyone else does as not working. It's difficult, I think, to really get a grasp of valuing and honoring each way of working.
I can't count the number of times over the last 15 years of being Chris's best friend that we would be working on something together. And oh my gosh, we would kind of talk, and he'd come in almost like he'd been working really hard. And then I found out that he was just on the phone with somebody. And you're like, wait, I thought you were working on the website, bro. Or I thought you were, yeah. You're like, no, working. I'd look over and he would literally be messaging people all over the internet on Facebook Messenger and Instagram and everywhere. And I'm like, but I'm over here hammering out this website, trying to learn how to do this stuff, and you're quote unquote working right now. My butt and it just Lemon leadership largely did like, oh, and honestly, to his credit, the dude knew everyone.
I was gonna say, just because you're having conversations with 3 different people on 3 different continents simultaneously doesn't mean you're working.
Yeah, I mean, it is easy to discount it because I'm the idea guy, and so unless you've come up with a good idea lately, what good are you really? Right? And I mean, obviously, that's just an arrogant, stupid way to look at the world because you don't realize that you do.
Right.
Until you know yourself better.
Yeah, totally.
So I thought one of the weird questions that is in the Lemon leadership question had to do with how you kind of think, whether it's long-term, short-term, medium-term, and just kind of, hit that off real quick. It has the luminaries looking at things as a long-range thinker, entrepreneurs as short to medium-term, managers as long-term, organizers as, man, that's got to be short-term. It doesn't even mention it. You probably forgot about
it. They don't think.
I'm not even kidding.
They don't think, they just do.
Right. He left it off for networkers too, so maybe it's.
See, that's just one example of like, what the heck, dude.
Well, and I thought it was funny too because they don't. There's not the same amount of questions for everybody.
And that was something I did write that down, the actual numbers, and so it could skew. It could skew your results because going down from LEMO and it's 78677. So, like an entrepreneur, no matter what, you could come up with a higher score depending on what you scored for those.
That is weird.
I think I'd be interested to, I love the idea. I get like this lemon idea, right. But we have kind of picked the fullness of the presentation. We've picked it apart a few times. Yeah. And I'd be interested to see. I don't know. I have the initial first edition. I guess you guys have the third edition. So apparently,
there is a third.
The second. There's a third.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Do you guys have the third, or you both have second?
Second.
So I'd be interested to see if it gets a little bit more fleshed out in that third edition. But yeah, I mean, the idea is solid. The idea, I think, is one that I've not, I've studied these kind of personality modalities for a long time. And when this one came across, it was certainly a kind of a way of looking at things that I had never seen. So I like it, but yeah, it's a bit frustrating at points where you're like, what the crap?
Yeah.
I'm curious, if he came across criticism, and that's why there's a third edition. I mean, he's been doing this for, at this point, almost 15 years. He's been traveling around the world to get it done, and he's written, I think, at least 10 books. So maybe
I think more like 12 or so. And he's spoken at Google and everything. And I actually just read yesterday. It's called Lemon for Lovers. Ooh. And let's just say it definitely doesn't have any qualms with just like putting stuff out there. I feel like there's not even like an editor on the team or something, because the amount of typos and like it's like what but it's out there. I mean, it's helping people, I guess. Like that's just it's a good example of just get something out.
Maybe he's like me. Maybe he's a luminary organizer, because he definitely says he's a luminary.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know, but it's going. I feel like it could go a little more thoroughly, but
I think another way to always really interesting look at these types of DISC, personality profile, all that stuff, is what your weakest ones are. Mm-hmm. I know some of you have mentioned it, but what's your weakest of the 5?
I'm a manager, or the weakest is manager.
You are the weakest link, manager.
That's funny, because I see you as, I don't know. I feel like I have to get these.
My numbers are all weird, because my numbers go 12, 13, 15, 16, 17. So I don't know how even that can go.
You took them out of order for funsies there? Or?
I feel like I'm most annoyed by managers and least identify with them, but at the same time, like, I appreciate processes. I don't know.
I'll say that's funny because I feel like because of the position that you've been,
Sure.
put into with what we do, like you try to get the processes put in place so that there's reliability and that things can be scheduled and accountability. Sure.
Right. But I don't like having to do that.
You're like, I hate myself.
No, like it annoys. Like I just want to stay in my lane, do my own thing, and other people do their own thing. But I guess I ask for certain things from other people, potentially. I don't know. I appreciate having processes in place. I just don't want to have to actually
do them,
mess with them myself. Like I hate being forced into other people's processes.
Sure.
I don't know. I guess I see it as just, this needs to be done. Let's just do it. But yeah, maybe it's through a manager lens. I have no idea. I need to take the test again, I think.
I used to have a supervisor who I would just argue with. Like the first thing we would do in the morning is fight, and people would like look at us like, "What's going on? What's happening right now? Mom and Dad are fighting." But it's because he was so, he had this is how it's done, and I would do something a different way, and he'd come back over and see, we got the job done, everything went flawlessly, but I didn't do it his way, and so there was a problem, and every morning it was a confrontation. It was great. It was a good time.
I couldn't care less how people do things as long as it gets done, and it's if it doesn't affect me at all, I don't care.
Sure.
But
I don't know. I prefer to stay in my lane and wait until the 11th hour and burn the midnight oil and get it done.
Every time.
Every time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
Healthy.
For the last 15 years that I've done you.
You just have to give you a deadline that is different than the actual deadline.
But see, he'll know that, and he'll still wait to the original deadline.
That's why I took everything different. Like he's on the audio part of the podcast. I know he's going to get that done, and we're good to go. Because there's
Friday night at 12.
I'm beating that deadline by like 2 hours every time.
It's an all-nighter every Friday night.
If the internet goes out.
Oh, that's yeah.
Yep.
Feel good. Feel safe.
You like the risk or something, huh? You like the adrenaline, or what is it?
Perhaps it focuses me. I mean, I think, and that's probably something, I don't know, some kind of personality trait in there somewhere. But just having that crunch, where I'm forced to really dig and find solutions and get things done. It's what I loved when I was working in an office environment where I was doing a lot of I'll just call them missions because I can't talk about it. I was doing a lot of missions, and things would happen, and you'd be the only person that could solve the problem. But it had to get done. Millions of dollars were on the line regularly, and the decisions you were making in split seconds mattered. So I really enjoyed that, and I think it's just kind of stayed with me ever since.
That was you had those traits before that job, sir.
Maybe.
Well, it probably just came out
did.
a lot more, I guess.
I think for me, the one that surprises me when I view myself through this lens is my lowest is entrepreneur. Because as a luminary, it looks, because I have so many ideas, it looks like, because I am in the broadest sense, I am an entrepreneur in the sense of I'm always starting new businesses because they're good ideas. But I have never, ever, ever, ever once been motivated by there's an opportunity. Right? I have seen so many opportunities. I could give a rat's ass if it's not meaningful. And when moving for money or moving for opportunity or moving to get something to the finish line has never once in my entire life been a motivation for me. And that's because I do tell people I'm an entrepreneur when they ask me what I do. And then I read this and I'm like, but I'm an entrepreneur. And you realize, like, no, the way he's defining it, which is a great way.
Sure.
I'm zero buttons. I would rather be a manager than that. Motivates me more. Getting it done right, having a good system, making it look sexy. Like that motivates me more than getting something,
just chasing opportunities.
I had to chuckle when that's how I scored out because I haven't gotten paid in years. Is that everything else fits? But
Yeah.
I guess that's the downside of working in the nonprofit environment. I took that too literally. No profit for you.
I think there's something to be said. So one, we are Epic as a team, so there's not a lot of managers amongst us in the sense of, we are significantly more motivated by pushing the status quo, looking forward, new ideas, stuff like that. So one, our company, our particular brand is going to kind of dictate that the 5 people on this call lean a certain way. But additionally, I got to be honest, I think there's a huge part of it that is more and more where society's going as a whole. Matt, we were just talking about not being motivated by money. There's an entire generation, a couple generations coming up that are going, that's kind of stupid. Mm-hmm. If I'm not meaningful at work, I don't really, the old-fashioned idea of overtime and bonuses and commissions is becoming less and less and less of a driving motivator in workplaces. Mm-hmm. A lot of people just say, hey, just look, if I've got to work I got to work my ass off just to get a higher commission, what is my option if I just had a salary and I could just chill? Mm-hmm. Right? Back in the day, there was generations that I've talked to my father, my grandfather, and there's kind of this absolute shift in motivation of, well, if I can earn more, then I'll work harder. And I haven't seen a lot of that in the millennial generation, not even in ourselves. It's look, if it's not meaningful, then just pay me a salary and I'll go home and relax. Mm-hmm. I'll do my 40 hours and great. But if you're trying to motivate me with more money, it's never worked for me.
And I think that's also part of how they grow up, because if you think about our parents and even our grandparents, they lived through a time where they didn't have food and they didn't have things. And we live in a time now where abundance for the majority of people is overflowing. And so I don't have to worry about rent because I just hang out at my mom's house, or I have a house that I share with 4 other people, or whatever it is that they get their needs met. So the money thing isn't that high of a priority. But if you take away your basic needs, that changes your motivation.
Yes, it would, in the sense of, I think, getting people who aren't working to get them to work, stuff like that. But I genuinely, if someone's got their 40 hours a week and they're making a decent income, and so if they're not making money and they don't have that stuff, sure. But to go from money to more money, that's the part that I'm just not seeing. If I'm going to no money to actually having money, then yes, I'll work harder. But if I've already got money and you're just wanting me to work even that much harder, I don't know. For me, it's okay, so I've got my basics and you just want me to work 80 hours instead of 40. It's not worth it. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because as you were talking, I was looking back at when I used to have a day job, if you will, and the people, first I was thinking, well, I kind of was more concerned about money when I was working there. But then I thought about it as the fact that as an organizer, I wanted to be appreciated for what I did. I wanted them to understand all that I was doing, kind of that whole concept. And I felt like getting a wage increase was a way of getting appreciated for it. And then I was also thinking about the people that I was managing and how it was that same notion. Work longer than 40 hours? Are you kidding me? Well, you're getting time and a half. Doesn't matter. And right. I basically had to learn, hey, make it so that they can leave early if possible. And then I was working with a team, and I was generally able to get them, to leave an hour or two before their 8 hours were done. And they were so happy to do that. Hey, you can, get this stuff done and you can leave. Okay. And they would just bust butt, get it done, and then they were out of there, and we didn't have to pay them the rest of the time, and they were super happy with it. So it was like great.
It's so funny. I was a stonemason for 4.5 years, and it was about, you guys know Clint. He was my boss. It was about 2.5 years in. He was like, "So, I would like you to stay longer, and I was going to offer you more money, but I think I figured out that won't actually motivate you to stay longer." And I just laughed. I said, "No, you're absolutely right." And he's like, "I don't know what to do with that." He's like, "How can I motivate you to stay longer?" And we had a good chat, and I said, "Look, dude, I care about other things, and so in this case, the best chance you got is to make your case to me. Why? Like, tell me why. Why do you need me to stay longer? Don't just expect me to be a robot. What's the company facing? What's the challenge you've got ahead of you? Why are you needing this? And I'm a good person. If you need me to stay long, now if you don't pay me more, I'm not going to do it for the same. But it's not going to be the thing that gets me over the edge. Is I can make an extra $20. That's just not." So yes, what's your case? And so I multiple times he kind of shifted his trying to, with me and honestly with I think all three of the guys on the crew, we were all kind of the same. It was just like, dude, one of the guys was a little bit less so because he had a couple kids and bills and stuff, so he was a little bit more motivated by money, but not much. And it's just it's an interesting dynamic that I think the entrepreneur gene out of Lemon, I think is we're going to find kind of a down dip in certain people that are motivated by that style.
Which is interesting because I know Gary Vee, as an example, said when he was growing up, it wasn't cool to be an entrepreneur. It's like now it's cool to be an entrepreneur, and everybody says they're an entrepreneur. He's like, but nobody really is.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm an entrepreneur, quote unquote, by one definition.
Right.
But by this metric, I'm not at all. Because I'm just not motivated by those things. I'm motivated by meaning. The ideas I have, I want to change. I literally want to change the world with like 5 times over, and has nothing to do with there's an opportunity. No, there's a need. I want to fill the need.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think just to hit on Gary Vee real quick, Gary Vaynerchuk, interesting guy in the sense that like because he's working in his zone. Like, because he loves what he's doing, like, he has no problem grinding out an amount of hours that I think are stupid. It's a stupid amount of hours. But for him, like, that's his zone. He loves what he's doing. And for him, it's not a sacrifice. Even though he does have a family, even though he is missing out on other things that he likes to do, this is what he's here for. And he recognizes that. So I think when you find your box and you are constantly working in it, like, it's, maybe it's not, doesn't feel like torture.
He has a family?
Yeah.
I would never have guessed that.
Right? He's got a kid. I know he talks about basketball with him, and he says, like, I'm never going to let him win.
See, being a luminary, like, I feel like I work 80 hours a week. You guys know me. You guys have all, I will sit on a call with you for 3 hours talking about ideas and consider it a good day at work. Like, and that this book finally gave me, in some ways, it gave me permission to be me, and it also helped me see some of the weaknesses that I needed to acknowledge. And that's where we'll go back to what Jen was saying at the very beginning. Is it is annoying when people do use these metrics. Oh well, I'm phlegmatic, melancholy, so therefore I don't have to mature. Is essentially what they're about to say. I'm if you're going disc personality profile, I'm a D, so I get to be a jerk. Like, how about you maybe learn how to be a little bit more S over here? Or I'm an L there. I'm a luminary, so I don't have to actually manage anything. Well, that's also equally stupid. So, not using these things as excuses, but using them as at least frameworks to say, hey, no, I do go smoke a couple cigars a week with people. And I talk about ideas, and they are potentially life-changing and world-changing. But if I don't implement them, then all they are is a cigar and a talk. So,
and I think just like Personality Plus says that basically your temperaments, which is what it's addressing, your temperaments, it has your strengths and your weaknesses of each temperament. But it's talking about how your weaknesses are really your strengths taken too far. So if you're a choleric who's a tends to be like one of the dominant people in a relationship, then that person, when they become like dominating, that's when it becomes a weakness. They become a jerk. Like, that's not a strength. That's taking your strength too far and not understanding how other people work. Whereas Brett Johnson, he talks about the dark side of lemons, and so he acknowledges that yes, there's the positives that they're good at, there's the negatives that they need to be aware of, and it's not just recognizing what you are, but it's being able to apply it and address the good and the bad.
Is there a list anywhere in the book where it gives the dark sides?
Oh, it's a chapter towards the end, 14. I'd give you a page number, but who knows what page is on your book?
Oh,
Right.
it's right there. But, yeah.
I was this was particularly enlightening to me because when I was reading about the organizer and about the I guess the dark side of it, and I could tell, I was like, oh, that's what happened at my previous job. One of the traits of the organizer is if they will be. I had two bosses. My first boss I got along very well with, and so one of the traits of the organizer is if you in a relationship, boss to employee, if you will, or whatever, the organizer will do whatever they can to make the boss's life easy,
to support
and so, but if the relationship boss to employee gets strained or does not work, then the organizer will basically shut down that whole trying to help and be more of a, trying to keep yourself alive. And instead of fomenting loyalty to the boss, they will foment loyalty towards themselves. And I was like, oh yeah, that's totally what happened with me. Totally. I mean, it was to a T. It was kind of freaky.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like my first boss was great. We busted butt. We were great together. And then the second boss came along, and he was, I don't know if threatened or whatever, but the relationship got really strained. And I was all about, forget this dude, and I'm the guy here, and the people that were under him, I was basically in charge of, so they were technically under me, and I felt like the whole team that was working was more loyal to me, and it was out of my own weakness, out of my own out of this the weakness that traditionally comes with an organizer or a person that has high organization or whatever you call it. But yeah, it was very enlightening, and it's like, okay, this is something I need to work with. And yeah,
I think that's the biggest use of these kinds of things, if you are approaching it from the right way, is just, it's a tool to recognize things in yourself. And obviously in situations and with other people, but
yeah, totally.
Right on. Did you find anything, Austin?
I did. I just, in this dark side, I really like this. I forgot about this. He talks about watching out for your second slice. We're basically, so you're, lemon, it's 5 different leadership styles. You're, typically, some people are really, like, I'm a really strong luminary, so my secondary is way second. But a lot of people are a little bit more balanced. And then basically that you're going to typically find your dark side manifests as a weakness in your second slice, as he says, or your second highest style. So if you're a luminary entrepreneur, that you're typically going to see your dark side show up in your entrepreneur more than your luminary. And he just talks about the different, I don't know, it's a sizable couple paragraphs. I don't know if I should read it, but it's just the idea of if it's your strength is your strength for a reason, and your second one, it would be where your weakness shows up a little bit more prominently. And I was just reading through the organizer, and it was absolutely true. Like the weakness of an organizer. They said organizers on the dark side of things, if you're a secondary organizer, that you can't stand to see everything running smoothly. So you throw bombs in the middle of something just so that you can feel useful.
Stop it. Just stop it.
That's funny because I've been like, as we're listening, I'm like, I feel like I'm all over the place, and my brain is very organized, and I'm a very organized person. But the more we talk about organization, and I'm like, that is not me at all. And so I wonder how maybe it's just a work style or thought process. Because I'm pretty sure Tina would probably put me as an organizer in our organization. No, you wouldn't? Okay. And I see that I do a lot of things that are organized, but I want things running smoothly.
I think that's the problem with the word, is because it doesn't actually mean organization.
Connotations are.
Because the biggest thing about them is that they do things random. Intuitively. They're random. Like they intuit a way to get things done. The manager is a person that's organized. That's like, okay, we're in this situation. Well, where's my my manual? Okay, we need to do this first. We need to do the organizer comes into a situation and they feel what needs to happen in a sense.
Yeah, organizers don't
I do
have
that a lot too. I mean, I do both of those.
Have you read the SOP?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm constantly like policy and procedures on my day job.
So
I copy and paste and send. Read that, please. And then do it. Just kidding.
Like just kind of Austin bringing up the second slice, but it got me wondering. I was like, because we had a business meeting, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or so, and I just was, I came out, I was like, I'm like this kind of stuff just makes me so like, so I wrote on a notepad while we're having the meeting.
Notes right there.
I was like, I don't want to be here right now. Get me out of here.
And I was like, we need to talk about this. Sit down and listen.
Well,
and I think the fun part about this, and I think that's where I am right now, is that the last 4 or 5 weeks have been just a complete internal shift for me, and just changing things. And so even though right now you're like, oh, I'm here, or I'm this kind of person, as we develop and grow through life, we change who we are. I mean, that's a lot of times when people have their midlife crisis, is things change. And I think this is a great tool to give some insight and some direction on growth.
Well, we've been going for about an hour now. Maybe we should take it around the circle. Yeah.
That was
yours?
I started it off.
Done.
All right. Well, I have a quote that I think is kind of cool. Using people to build organizations isn't half as fulfilling as using organizations to build people.
Oh.
That was
a good one.
Book.
I enjoyed that one.
And burnout comes from functioning differently than how you're wired, or like being in a position that you're trying to function in a way that,
Stretch the rubber band.
Yeah, we talk about stretching the rubber band.
No!
And then one final quote: celebrating differences is the alternative to irritation or resignation. And I think for me, that's something that I want to do. Like, I want to celebrate the difference. I want to be able to see the value in all the differences in a really, like, I want it deep down in me, really, really see the value and appreciate the value in all the different ways that people function. I do on the surface, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, I don't always feel it the way I would like to feel it. And yeah, that's something I want to work on myself.
Yeah,
I have been working on, but
I think that's a big part of like a culture of honor, is being able to recognize that diversity, can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a parting gift.
Well, thank you.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
Dazzle us. Embrace it.
The thing that I got from this was the benefit of knowing. I mean, it was kind of like my hook. The benefit of knowing how you or having something that would give me insight into what how I'm wired, or how to function better in a sense. And yeah, that was, if anything, I mean, give it a read so that you can have an idea of what your tendencies are, and why you do things. I know that it's very easy to use it as a cop out. Well, I'm just that way, but it's also, it can also be used as a way to improve yourself and know what things you need to work on, what things trigger what things, and how to deal with that. And on top of that, how other people are wired, and how you can react to them, or give them the benefit of the doubt if they're doing a certain thing that bugs you or whatever. So,
and something we didn't talk about at all, but that I think is helpful to note that it's available in the book, is the way to approach stuff that you want to get done, or scenarios of how to talk to the different types of leadership, a way to motivate them, or to get through to them and be on the same page about things. That's something that the book does talk about too. So
it is kind of funny, because I mean, you can almost end up basically talking a different language.
Totally.
Speaking the same language, but saying completely different things than you think you're saying. So
I think for me, the two takeaways, one is just a kind of doubling down on, look, what you define as working may not necessarily be what somebody else defines as working, right? And so when your luminary boss is sitting there thinking about something, and you're out there pounding the pavement, closing deals, or you're out there managing people and getting stuff done, and you think your boss is this lazy ass, person who doesn't deserve the work and everything like that, like, maybe open up a bit and try to understand a different way to look at their work. And it's still very difficult at times to give it the value that they do. And that's where, you either choose to humble yourself a bit, or you choose to, dig in your heels and say, look, I don't care all the thinking you do in the world, you're stupid. That's on you, but, try to open up. And the second thing would be understanding the life cycle of a project, or the life cycle of a company, that different leaders are needed at different times, right? I'm doing a few projects right now. I am a luminary / visionary / idea person to the core, and I have learned through Epoch and through other ideas and projects that I am a terrible manager. I am a horrendous manager, and in the context of Lemon leadership, a rather poor entrepreneur. I'm good at organizing, and I'm good enough at networking. So I've kind of already in my mind realizing at some point different projects that I'm working on will get to the point where I need to hand the leadership over to a manager, or to an entrepreneur, or to whatever that project needs. That not every project needs you to be in charge all the time. And knowing your strengths to the point where you can say, hey, and if you see like corporations, large corporations, like General Electric or Ford or whatever, you see the carryover of the CEOs, that they're changing their personalities based on who's at the helm, and that really is what leadership DNA does. And so understanding that you are great in certain scenarios and maybe not so great in others, and even if it's project by project in your workplace or the company as a whole, maybe you founded it and you're realizing it's floundering. Maybe it's time to bring in a vice president that can take it to the next level, who's got a different skill set than you. So, you're not fit for every project that you've ever come across, and neither is anybody else. And so embrace those strengths and find a way to kind of work with more people.
That's good. That kind of edges into what I was going to say. Jerk.
Sweet.
I mean, we've talked about how we can use this to relate to the people that are in our organization. Austin was just hitting on how you can use it to help develop an organization for the long term. And if hindsight is 20/20, and we can look back and see things as they really are, I think this allows us to have an appropriate lens that we can see why relationships went the way they did. So I hope that you enjoyed this last hour. We've been really kind of picking up our social media game as a crew. So by all means, engage us on social media. If you have something that you want to see with the show, if you want to ask questions, whatever, engage us some way, somehow. The website is the Epoch, EPOCH.org. And we're trying to do this thing. We're doing this thing every week. So we got a track record. We've recorded past the point where most people fail. So we're rocking.
Yes, we win. What is that, 10 episodes?
10 episodes is that death podcast death note.
Right. So anything else?
We're still alive.
Still alive. That said, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening, and catch you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.